Hey folks, so this is a topic which I'm going to try and be concise about, but also clear. And this is the difficult part, and I'll be honest with you, this is the second time I've tried to film this video because I tried in the previous time I included too many slightly tangential topics, and I think it diluted and confused the point I was trying to make. So this is the point. I'm going to start with it in a nutshell. Armament, so how well armed you are, okay, for self-defense or protecting territory or anything else, is only relative to what your potential enemy or invader, intruder, burglar, whatever, has, okay? So if you live in a country where you can own an M4 rifle, but your attacker or invader can also have an M4 rifle, they cancel out. This is a bit like the topic we've spoken about with dueling. People often go, oh, a small sword is not very good compared to a montante, is it? But that's irrelevant if you're having a small sword duel. If you have a small sword and the opponent has a small sword, you're having a duel, they cancel each other out because they're the same thing. So if you live in a country which forbids all firearms, and the criminals just never use firearms, then your attacker, your enemy, is unlikely to have a firearm. And that is actually true. Okay, so if you look at countries like Japan or even the UK, it's actually statistically very, very rare for a baddie to use a gun, even in bank robberies and all kinds of stuff. Home invasions in UK almost never ever involve a gun, for example. So therefore, if the invader, if the enemy has, let's say, a kitchen knife, and what you have access to is a kitchen knife, that cancels out. So at that point, the enemy, the goodie and the baddie, each having an M4 rifle, or the goodie and the baddie each having a kitchen knife, they cancel each other out. Okay. Now, if you live in a country where it's very difficult for the baddies to get hold of guns, but if you yourself have a gun, you have a 12-bore shotgun, for example, then in relative terms, even though your 12-bore shotgun is in most scenarios not as an effective weapon as the M4 rifle, you having a 12-bore shotgun in a place where the attacker, the enemy, will almost never have a gun, you're actually better armed than the person with the M4 rifle in a different country, in a different place. That is purely my point. And this does relate to history and swords and historical laws and things like that I often talk about in my videos. So the example I often give is in medieval England, 13th, 14th, 15th centuries, it was illegal for common people to wear a sword in a city. That was the law. Why? Because the government likes to be better armed than the common people. They'd had the Peasants' Revolt and various other incidents which had meant that the ruling elite didn't want the common people to be as well armed as the ruling elite. So if you were a knight or higher in rank, you could indeed walk around with a sword in the city. You could wear it openly. If you were a commoner, like me, or most of the people watching this video, you couldn't walk around the city wearing a sword because you weren't one of the ruling elite, so you weren't worthy. So quite simply to say, whenever we talk about armaments, and this could be talking about medieval warfare, it could be talking about 19th century colonial rule, it could be talking about the modern world and modern gun laws and things like this, whether you are well armed or averagely armed or poorly armed or underarmed or disarmed, is only relative, really, in self-defense terms, to what your attacker, what your potential attacker is armed with. If your potential attacker is a really tyrant regime, for example, like we've witnessed in some Middle Eastern countries or African countries, if the people ruling the country are much better armed than the common people, well then the common people usually are screwed, aren't they? If everyone's got the same level of armament, so if everybody owns a Kalashnikov, if everybody has an AK-47, then that kind of cancels out. If there are no guns and everybody has just swords, then that cancels out. But if you could create a place where only the people you trust, and this is what they did in medieval Europe, the ruling elite did for themselves. So if you can create a society where only the people you really trust have the really good weapons, and then the people you don't trust don't have good weapons, theoretically for the ruling elite, That was a great situation because to their thinking and to their mind, the goodies have the weapons and the baddies don't. Anyway, there we go. That's a simple point, but because there's so many potential politics and discussions about gun legislation in different countries and you know, the God-given right to bear arms and all this kind of stuff wrapped in there, and emotions as well, it's very difficult to make this point concisely, but it's a point that I think is worth making and is worth thinking about and being aware of. If you have got a really beautifully crafted piece of weaponry that you consider is your thing, that you defend yourself and your rights and your property with, if all the attackers have got the same type of equipment, that actually just cancels out. All you're doing is you're keeping up with them at that point. Ideally, you want to be better armed than your potential attackers are. So if you're worried about society breaking down, if you're worried about the government, if you're worried about home intruders, really you want to be better armed than them. You don't only want to be the same level of armed as them. Thanks for watching. Give us a like and a subscribe. Please avoid politics in the comments underneath here because I know it's going to break out, but please keep it civil. Remember, we all live in different countries with different laws. Most of us, at least, want to live peacefully and in harmony and for us to be safe. Keep yourselves safe in these troubled times. I'm sure everything's going to be okay. And all the best. And I will see you soon on this channel for another video. Give us a like and a subscribe unless you hate me. If you hate me, then unsubscribe and give us a dislike. Cheers, folks. See you soon. Thanks for watching. We've got extra videos on Patreon. Please give our Facebook a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers, folks.